Okay, so today I am going to do kind of what I did last week and just kind of go over events over the last week. With the one topic that I'm skipping completely is Trump. And if you want to hear more about Trump, you can do what I talked about, or you watch what I talked about yesterday. But I'm not going to relitigate that. It's somewhat painful to pour your heart into trying to prepare a thoughtful, reasoned understanding of something and then see people drop like flies. But it is what it is. I never held myself out to be anything other than what I am, and I'm providing perspective. And I'm not even like rooting for the guy. I'm just saying, hey, look, I this is what I see coming. But I'm not going to talk about that at all going forward. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is going back from last Saturday forward. And if you have any questions, I will stop and honor your questions first. So feel free to ask whatever you want to ask about, except for anything about Trump. Okay, so if we go back, roll back the clock just 1 week. Last week, Russia was about to place nukes in Belarus. Now, as I follow up on these reports, excuse me, allergies are just killing me. As I follow up on these reports, it appears that, um, um, yeah, it's not going to happen anytime soon. Or if it does happen anytime soon, it won't be like anything that, oh, look at that. General Armageddon is here to harass me again. So you have just been removed because, again, he's proven himself to be a somewhat of a troll. He doesn't like to be called a Russian troll because he is he claims to be an American, actually ex-serviceman, but he's spouting the same Russian propaganda points in a not kind way. And so, General, you have been struck. I won't even see your messages. So that's just the way. I mean, I try to be civil with everybody, but when you prove yourself to be uncivil, then that's what's going to happen. So, okay. Hello from Israel and good morning from Tucson. I'm just going to review last week's events. I was started to talk about Belarus and the Russian nukes. It appears that while Putin is saber rattling, and again, he's trying to deter the West. He's doing his level best to deter us, and he's got to like ratchet it up. And so putting it in Belarus, I guess, is his way of ratcheting it up. But again, it's a line that'll be crossed again. He just he can't actually use these. If he uses these, he knows he's going to be a pariah for decades, maybe even generations to come. So, and the U.S. government doesn't see that there's any infrastructure that would allow nukes to be placed in Belarus. At the same time, there's no sign that China is actually sending weapons to Russia. At least officially, that's the U.S. government's position. I'm so sorry about the coughing. In Russia, they're talking about don't go to the enlistment office because apparently if you go to the enlistment office, you're more likely to get kind of sucked into the system. And I was wrong a few weeks ago. I was saying, hey, they're going to have to close the border again and do a second wave of mobilization. I think they're just going to do it quietly. And they're just going to kind of, on the down low, kind of replenish their numbers. And that seems to be what's happening. So I was wrong about that, and I'm admitting that. I don't think they'll be closing the borders. I think they'll just, like, people will start disappearing as they get the summonses or get pulled into these offices. Sunday, the 26th of March, North Macedonia announced it would be sending helicopters. This is kind of rounding out the fleet. There's a number of countries sending jets and or helicopters now to Ukraine. That's good. They need it as quickly as possible. The U.S. is demanding emergency. The U.S. is demanding an emergency meeting over the nuclear plan. Of course, next month will be Russia's turn in the Security Council. So, oh, Matt just popped up. There are probably already nukes in Kaliningrad, so nukes in Belarus. Yeah, somebody else made the same point in another article. So good on you for saying that. So having nukes in Belarus doesn't make any difference according to the Swedish military. Right? They have Kaliningrad. They already have a beachhead. So this is why I'm saying it's just trying to amplify or increase the pressure, but it's not, nothing's going to go anywhere. No, it doesn't help. And for whatever reason, Lukashenko is fine with being a vassal of Putin, and he's okay with that. So, okay, so NATO is condemning this nuclear rhetoric. And there's another article I saw that the U.S. is behind like 13 years in ammunition production in order to replenish the stocks that they have sent to Ukraine. Now, I'm not terribly worried about that because if they got very serious about it, they could make it happen a lot faster than 13 years, but we're just not on a wartime footing. If we needed to be, we could be very quickly, and we have the industrial base that would allow it. So yeah, I'm not terribly worried about that. Okay, shifting over to Monday, the 27th. So again, you've been seeing Bakhmut's about to fall, Bakhmut's about to fall, Bakhmut's about to fall. It's not falling. It's stabilizing. Both sides see it as a necessary thing. I think it's still true that the Russians are losing a lot more than it's worth in Bakhmut. But the Ukrainians want to hold them there for whatever reason. I'm not a military guy, right? Mats is on here. He's a military guy. He could probably tell you more than I can about why you'd want to hold your enemy in a particular position, maybe while you're planning to do something else somewhere else, or just to get great attrition. Don't know exactly what it is, but they're holding them there. It's a really bizarre thing to my mind because neither side really wants to fight in Bakhmut, but they just they see the advantage of fighting there on the Ukrainian side, and on the Russian side, they really need a breakthrough so that they can have a moral victory. Zelensky had a trip to Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, which I think was good. He got out, and he got to a number of places over the course of this week. Now, I saw the two articles on the same day that were really interesting about the recruitment efforts to get men to fight in Ukraine with incentives. And the incentives are things like a signing bonus of 2,500 US every day that they're in offensive operations is a bonus. Every 100 kilometers or whatever. I don't know how to talk in kilometers and meters. I guess it's 100 meters that's seized. They'll get an extra bonus of $100 or something along those lines. Of course, the risk of death is very high in that case as well. But yeah, it's those kind of things. But that was back to back with another article that talked about how soldiers were being shot if they retreated. Now it's absolutely fascinating to my mind. But this isn't new for the Russian army. The Russian army did this in World War II, and that's quite an incentive. Cheryl said, reporting from Ukraine said Ukraine is able to resupply through tunnels, drawing the Russians into a kill box. Wow, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. And whatever Georgie says over there, he's pretty spot on. I did not see that particular video, but yeah, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. For a while, it was looking a little precarious, but if they're able to resupply, that's great. At the same day, this was again on Monday, the 27th, Senator Hawley was asking the Inspector General to track down money to Ukraine. Senator Hawley is more aligned with Trump than not, and that's as much as I'm going to say about anything related to Trump. I'm avoiding that topic today. You can go back and watch yesterday's video and then decide that you too want to leave me, and whatever. That's fine. I mean, Again, I never held myself out as anything other than who I am. I'm trying to give my analysis. I wasn't even saying I want this to happen. I was saying this is what I perceive. But Senator Hawley is on that side of the equation, and so he's asking the Inspector General to track down, where all the money is going. I think that's a fair thing to do. You can track where all the money's going. You should be able to track where the money's going. Of course, once you get out on the battlefield, the fog of war is going to obscure it, but at least you can track it to certain points. But I don't think there's anything wrong about that. It's, I think, probably a political tool to show, less support, but I don't think much will come of it. Okay, Tuesday, the 28th. Germany announced Leopard 2s were already in Ukraine, and I've seen others reporting that they were on their way or that they had crossed the border or whatever else. Um, so, uh, let's see. Putin is preparing for a long war. Now, he was talking about digging in, and his spokesman Peskov was talking about how they really need to prepare themselves mentally, and they're doing things. I don't think Putin is going anywhere, and I think people that are saying like, "Oh, he's on the cusp of giving up," or he's going to crack sooner or later here. I think it's going to be later. I know people probably won't like hearing that. I'm trying to be a realist and show you what I perceive. Um, and I wish it was sooner. I really do. And I don't believe it will be sooner. I believe it will be later. I mean, he'll just have to be crushed in the process. Same day, there was a great article about how Mark Hamill, the Luke Skywalker character, the actor who played Luke Skywalker, is doing the voiceovers for Ukraine air alerts. And anything that moves things forward and tries to help people be safer. And I mean, if he can lend his voice to that, and that will, cause people to listen more, great. If you have questions, I'm happy to entertain whatever those questions are. um, but I'm avoiding completely the subject of Trump as much as humanly possible. So that was kind of the point today. And again, if you want to hear my views on that, you can go back to yesterday. Wednesday the 29th, France recognizes the Holodomor as genocide. Cheryl, what's the name of the movie that you turned me on to that talked about the Holodomor? You're the one that caused me to go watch this movie, and it was actually really profound, very moving. I found it on, I can't remember if it was Netflix or Amazon Prime, but it was on one of those things. But if you're not familiar, Mr. Jones, thank you, Cheryl. If you're not familiar with the Holodomor, you really need to get a refresh of history. And it's not something that was really taught in my historical education. I learned about it much later. It was on YouTube. Okay, thank you, Cheryl. But you need to understand, like, I mean, there's context here, right? If Stalin is starving out people in the Holodomor, there's a reason why Ukrainians are nationalistic and don't want to work with Stalin or be part of Russia or things along those lines. So, yeah, you just need to watch it. So France recognized the Holodomor as genocide. Prigozhin admits Bakhmut damaged his forces, which is kind of a stunning thing for Prigozhin to admit, but he's all over the map. I can't quite understand that cat. He's talking about how awesome he is, but he's deprived of this, but they're fighting, but they're losing, but anyway, that's just Prigozhin. There was also another interesting article about Bellingcat proving that Ukrainian soldiers harassing a woman in a video was staged, and they did that with geolocation. So it was it was a pretty significant thing that that they could show that forged video, and they were trying to make propaganda points out of, see, this is how Ukrainians are. One of my great fears after atrocities, and we just passed the mark of Bucha. I think Bucha is like, or we're about to pass Bucha. I think Bucha was today a year ago, or about this time a year ago. One of my great fears when I see things happen that Russians do X, that Ukrainians will do that in kind. And to do that in return would actually be the worst possible strategy, because you will start to alienate your Western allies, and start to lose support. They have to rise above it. It's a hard thing. It's a very difficult thing, but yeah, they weren't doing that. And Bellingcat, good on them. They figured it out. That's not what was going on. Cheryl says Prigozhin's desire for prestige is at odds with his need to beg the MOD for ammo. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's what it is. It's like dealing with Sybil. Like, he's got multiple personalities. He needs this, but he wants that, but he, right? Yeah, that's a good observation. Okay, so that's all for Wednesday. And then Thursday, a massive round of Russian attacks in multiple directions in Bakhmut and Lyman and Advivinka. Again, I'm not Ukrainian. I can't pronounce some things. But in multiple places, there were, Russian attacks. And the Russians keep pressing. And they need it more badly. They need the win, that they need the moral victory to be able to wave around in their press far more than the Ukrainians do. Just holding out. Now, so okay, again, Thursday was day 400. Just holding out for 400 days, huge achievement. I mean, it's really remarkable. This when you thought you were going to take over the country in take the government in 3 days and take on the the whole country, have it locked down in about 3 weeks, be in Odessa within a couple of weeks, and be over to the border of Moldova. There were some plans that leaked out about how, there was actually going to be some significant ethnic cleansing within Ukraine. Like this was genocidal from the beginning. So not standing up would have been the worst thing that they could have done. Yeah, Zelensky gave a speech in Bucha on the anniversary. Yeah, so it just passed. Yeah, like yesterday, was it? I knew we were right about it, and I remember seeing something about him going there, but I didn't actually get to that particular article. Have I touched on the UNBS? That's next. Hold on a second. So Friday was the Russians. This is my very next point. The Russians taking over the UN Security Council as of today. That's like the article was yesterday talking about how they were taking over tomorrow. So if that's what you're talking about, so the Security Council rotates. So there is a whoever is. I'm going to put this a little bit closer to me because somebody's mowing outside. I don't know if you can hear that. Whoever, like the five, the Security Council, the presidency, whoever like is chairing the Security Council rotates, and it happens to be Russia's turn, which is crazy ironic that Russia is the chair of the UN Security Council, which is charged with trying to prevent wars in places. But okay. So the U.S. is telling them, like, you better act professionally while you're there, and I'm sure we will. I'm sure we'll hear more of Russophobia and this kind of nonsense, like the Timothy Snyder did such a great job speaking to that concept of Russophobia. And honestly, I don't know why we're not talking about Ukrainophobia, because that would be a far better topic. Okay, Spanish Prime Minister was urging President Xi to talk to Zelensky. I think Xi is the most interesting figure in this. Well, no, Zelensky probably is, but other than Zelensky, Xi is the most interesting figure here, because I can't quite pin him down, but he doesn't want to support Russia full-throatedly, but Russia's an ally in overturning the multipolar West, but he wants to profit when it looks like Russia's not going to do so hot, and he'll come in and sell Russia everything they need afterwards to rebuild and try to pick up the pieces and work with the West. He's good morning. He's an interesting character, but he doesn't want to get embroiled. He doesn't want to lose trading privileges with the West. He knows that, and while Putin is just so like. Putin's like a jilted ex who just can't see straight anymore. I mean, this is the analogy that I would use. He's like he just can't see how irrational he is. Xi is a lot more clear-eyed, and he's going, this might not be the best plan. Let's not get involved with this. Where Putin's like, well, we're just going to go with the BRICS, and I'm going to have my trading partners there, and right. Xi wants to trade with everyone. Like he wants the war to be over so he can run that Silk Road back through Ukraine up to Moscow. I mean, if you look at the map, that's one of the projected routes. So, yeah, I think he's just in a different place, and I don't think he's the threat to Ukraine that we think he is. Now, does he want Taiwan? Yeah, he wants Taiwan. But as far as getting involved in Ukraine and kicking off World War III in this kind of alliance with Putin and Russia, I think the odds have gone down significantly. Cheryl said ATP Geopolitics said Russia is headed to the UN Security Council. Hold on, that just something popped up here. Oh, thank you. R&R just I think gave me $5. I think that's what that is. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Um, okay, ATP Geopolitics said Russia is headed to the UN Security Council in February 2022. Russia just wants to give the finger to all the yeah, and that's exactly right. His analysis is right. Everything else that I read say like part of what Putin wants to do here, he wants to take Ukraine, he wants to collapse that in, he wants to be Peter the Great, but he also wants to upend the world order that exists. And again, it's like the jilted ex where he just can't even see straight. Like he sees Russia as, and so one of my favorite dogs is a min pin. I don't know if you know what a min pin is. I just admire them because they're this big. I think they're this big, right? they think they can take you in a fair fight. Now their big brother, an actual Doberman pitcher, could probably take you in a fair fight. But this guy, I mean, he can bite your leg a little bit, but he can't do it. So that's what that's where Putin is in my estimation. He just he thinks he's the Soviet Union still, and he's really not. He's a fraction of his former self, and he wants to be this great power, and he's got this envy. But you're really second or third tier now, like, and you're decreasing. So okay, so that was what was happening in the Security Council. And with Xi, I think Xi will talk to Zelensky eventually. At least backdoor, he'll talk to Zelensky. And if Zelensky's smart, he'll just talk. He won't talk so much about getting Putin to stop doing things or put pressure on him, but say, look, we want to do business. We have to rebuild. We need you. Like, help us get this done so we can rebuild. And that's probably the high road to Xi's heart, which is ironic how business-like China has become after they were communist China, and again, communist China is a really weird platypus. They still want to have government control, like full-throated control, while they have capitalism, and those two things are at odds. So when you have freedoms, you have to have all freedoms. I mean, if you have political freedom, but you don't have religious freedom, or you have religious freedom, but you don't have freedom of speech, or you have this freedom, but you can't vote, or that freedom, but you can't, right? You have to have all, they come together. And if you try to decouple them, it doesn't work the same way. And now when you have this freedom, you have to put up with things that you don't necessarily like. Like if you're hard left, you don't like me necessarily. But, so ATP Geopolitics, right? He and I did an episode months ago where we're like, hey, look, we're exact opposites, right? He's atheist, I'm Christian. He's liberal, I'm conservative. But on Ukraine, we agree. And underlying all that was that we agree on more fundamental things. Like we agree that he can be wrong. Like I think he's wrong, he thinks I'm wrong, but we're cool with that. As opposed to being in Russia where we all have to toe the party line, whether we believe it or not. Well, we can allow each other the freedom to see things differently, and that's okay. So in China, they want to have the governmental control, and they have a lot of government control and capitalism at the same time, and it doesn't work like it otherwise would. I was at an academic conference a while back. This was about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. It was just before COVID. And I was talking about what my presentation was about, and the moderator talked about how when he was in China, like he saw things happen like in a matter of months to build this big project or whatever. Like we could never have done it here in that kind of time. Well, yeah, because they're displacing the resources that would have been in the private sector doing other things with essentially maybe not slave labor, maybe that's a little bit too much, but with labor that is inefficiently allocated to that particular project. So they can make that project go very quickly, but what's not being done at the same time? And that's what he's missing. But he was like fawning all over the Chinese, like, oh, they're so smart. And he was the provost of a brand name university that I'm not going to mention, that you would all know, that I was horrified. I would never want to work for this guy because his mentality was just authoritarian. Anyway, that's so, but Xi simultaneously, it's kind of like he's also schizophrenic, where he wants to be authoritarian, but he wants to do the business. And yeah, so at any rate, I've belabored that long enough. Okay, some more comments popped up. Hello from Cambodia. Sorry I'm late. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. I turned 40 today. We're holding a Ukraine benefit party tonight, collecting for Ukraine. That's awesome. That is such a cool way of dealing with that and being able to support it. I asked a number of people, like, how do you support Ukraine? And they came up with some amazing answers. And I was kind of thinking, okay, so certainly there'll be these few things, but they came up with a number of things beyond that, and I was like, that was really encouraging to me as well. Hello from Norway. Let's see, what else? Is anyone in the position to conduct shuttle diplomacy? I don't think so yet. That would be my answer. Maybe in a little while, but they have to grind things down first. Mr. Mann says, hello, Professor. Today, the UK Ministry of Defense stated that after 10 years as a CGS, there is a realistic possibility that Gerasimov is pushing the limits of how far Russia's political leadership will tolerate failure. Yeah, I think so. And Gerasimov wasn't even really involved in the initial planning. I've read some articles about this, and he opposed it when it first came. And then he kind of fell into line, saluted, said, okay, this is what we'll do. But he was cut out of the initial planning. Mr. Mann, what do they mean by tolerating? Does he personally have influence, or is he the best they've got, and that's why they can't replace him with someone better already? That's a tough one. He's smart. He knows what he's doing, and he was smart enough to oppose the original plan, which was a catastrophe. I'm not a military man, and even I could see like that didn't seem like a smart plan. You diffused all your forces, but I guess it was it was predicated on the idea that they were going to just be welcomed with flowers and they were just going to roll in and take over and it would be like Crimea all over again, but it didn't work that way. Okay. Robert Plant, just wanted to say thanks for what you do. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's somewhat disheartening to see people misunderstand or want to lash out at me when I'm not supporting a particular point, and they're like, well, but you're like this, and no, I'm not. But I'm just trying to interpret things for you and give you some insight and clarity about what's going on. Good morning from Utah. Do I think that the Russian Federation will fall apart after they lose in Ukraine? I hope not. I hope they hold together so that they can, and this is something that you need to hear and understand why. I want them to hold together so that Ukrainians can get their children back, so reparations can be made, so that all the things can happen that need to happen to help Ukraine rebuild and to defang them and cause them to not do this again, but to split into different groups or sub-countries or something along those lines, warring factions of some sort. I don't want to see that. I just want to, like, what happened after World War II with both Japan and Germany was instructive to me. And I think that can happen again, but they have to be kind of brought to the place where they have to say uncle. So that's what I think. Okay. At any rate, I was talking about what was going on with Zelensky and the Spanish Prime Minister urging Xi to talk to Zelensky. Zelensky was also doing something awesome. He was touring the country and giving a real morale boost to people all across the country in various places. And that's a role that only he can really do as effectively. Like he's a megaphone when he does it. Somebody else speaks, but he shouts when he does it. So that was good. Other questions? I watch both me and ATP, and I support anyone who supports Ukraine. Right, and that's the position you should have. This is the most important moment since 1938. Right on. Thoughts on Finland achieving NATO membership? I don't think it'll be very long. I don't think the political pressure will. I think the political pressure will let up, and they'll let them through. Lydia Wade, do you hope that the Russian Federation holds together in its current form, which basically has satellite states that it's conquered and where it keeps minority populations? Only enough to do this, and then if after Ukraine has been being made whole and children are being returned, if after that they visit the question of, hey, if you're a republic within Russia and you want to Uh, go your way, vote and go your own way. We'll have international inspectors and legitimate, non-occupied kind of something. I would be fine with that, but I don't want it to like implode into Mad Max. Cheryl says, "Do you think China will help prop Russia up in a weakened state?" Not like we were fearing, but I think China will position itself to benefit from whatever happens, whether Russia's winning or losing, because the Chinese are very shrewd about that kind of thing. Okay, a couple last points, and then we'll be done, and I'll answer whatever last questions you have. So JDAMs are apparently being used in Ukraine. These are the smaller version, the little brother version of JDAMs, but still JDAMs. And they have a 45-mile strike range, and they're very powerful. So that was good to see. Russia accused the Wall Street Journal reporter of being a spy. That was very bad, and I think he thinks he has another one of the WNBA player. I think he has another like hostage like that, and that's you just can't have that. There's a place where you should escalate, and you should escalate by throwing all the Russian reporters out of the country in the U.S. immediately if that's the case. As long as he's not like legitimately spying. Like if he was legitimately spying, then you have a whole different problem set. But assuming that he's not, and I don't think he was. I mean, they need to retaliate in a significant way to show this is not okay, or um, do something that shows that this cannot go on, because bullies only understand force. I mean, that's just the way that works. Okay. Other questions. Mitch Asdown, did you hear that there may be a tunnel from Chazov Yard direction to Bakhmut? Yes, somebody just talked about that a little bit ago, and so that's pretty awesome. I think what Russia has to be brought to its knees in order for them to change their whole mindset. Exactly, George. I couldn't agree more. Ozzy says, I know it's unlikely, but my hope is that eventually Russia becomes part of Europe. Imagine a Russia integrated along the lines of what Poland has achieved. Unlikely, but possible, and the best outcome. I don't think so. Okay, it maybe that is the best outcome, but I don't think that can happen, because the mentality, the cultural mindset. I talked about culture a couple of videos ago. It's very powerful, and the cultural mindset, the difference just between Ukraine and Russia, which Russia sees no distinction in, Ukraine sees huge distinctions in. Their mentality is so very opposite. One's been authoritarian and doubled down on that, and one has become nationalistic and Western looking and fiercely independent, and has been for generations, and that doesn't just shift overnight. So I think that'll be hard to get to. Matt says, this is Matt Larson, says both Turkey and Hungary have approved Finland's application. Stoltenberg says it was just a matter of days until full membership. And yeah, that's similar to what I have read, Matt. Thank you for sharing that. That Turkey had already conceded and Hungary was about to, but I didn't read that they had, so that's good. Cheryl says, I feel better after Millie explained why ATACMS aren't the be-all and end-all. Other systems are better to do the job. Yeah, I mean, they have to really weigh the options of what will be useful or not useful in which ways. Yeah, that's right. Ozzy said, Cossack Ukraine versus Surf Russia. That's exactly. Thank you very much, Ozzy, because you've said it better than I could. But that's right. There is just something going back into Kazakh history as opposed to serfdom in Russia. That's just different. So, okay. Last thing, North Korea weapons. There's evidence that North Korea is supplying weapons, and we have that evidence. And that's the last thing that I have up through yesterday. So that was a week's worth of catching up on the news. And so I figure, worst case scenario here, if I do a live stream, people can watch it afterwards and catch up on the news. If they catch us while talking, I'll answer any questions. Speaking of questions, anything that you want to ask now. I'll answer, and then we'll be done. So thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm grateful that you all care as much as you do. Most of you, I recognize your names and your regulars, and you interact, and you really want to know as much as you can and be informed, and that's really awesome. Last questions, if anything pops up. Otherwise, I'm going to be done. Okay. I don't see anything yet. So I'm not going to go back over to the other topic that I'm trying to avoid here today. So 10, 9, uh, Miss Mrs. T Mag, laugh out loud. Just want to say thank you. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being involved and trying to keep informed. Cheryl said thank you so much. Uh, Don Juan DeMarco, 15, 1,500 kilogram vibe bombs coming. Are you talking about from the Russians? Yeah, I saw this thing about the glide bombs as well, and I'm the Russians are all when the Russians advertise that this big bad weapon's coming, it's probably not going to be as bad as promised. Which Republican candidate is best for Ukraine? So I said I wasn't going to talk about Trump, but that's not the same issue. Um, I think you have full-throated support from Pence, who's not declared yet, but if he does, he's there. And by the way, people are like, well, I don't want to vote for a Republican. Don't. But you do want to be in a position where you have your Democrat candidate support Ukraine and your Republican candidate support Ukraine. So you get somebody who supports Ukraine in either event, and then go vote for the guy that you want to vote for, and work against the guy that you don't want to be in there. That's fine. But we all want support for Ukraine. So Pence is probably a good choice if he declares. And he would probably be fairly viable compared to some others. Ambassador Haley, Nikki Haley, has had full-throated support for Ukraine, and so she was the former governor of South Carolina. She's got a pretty good record between those two things. I think she might get some traction as well somewhere down the line. Right now, it's all talking about the Trump and DeSantis show, and a lot can change. We're a year and a half out. Okay. Which Republican? Okay, Lydia Wade. Okay, thank you for the discussion. Moxie says, we have a good picture of Russia economy, aka bias by our side. So it's hard to make sense of the Russian economy because they can just make up numbers. Like the Russian bank, nobody can check or challenge. They're cut off by SWIFT. They cut off to trading partners. They can't sell their oil at the same rate that they are. They're expending huge sums in trying to destroy Ukraine. So they can't be doing well, but I can't tell exactly where they are. So it's opaque. It's hard to see into it and understand what's going on. It will take a while for the ground to dry again after the snowstorm. Okay. Does Pence have any chance at all? I think so, because there's a lot of variability potential over time. So we'll just have to see. A year and a half is an eternity in politics. John Garofalo, NATO treaty, a member can only be kicked out if they directly threaten the safety of a fellow NATO member. Okay, I didn't know that. That's good to know. Thank you, Ozzy. Syed Karzan. Hi, Prof. My question is, can ordinary Putin supporters, Russians, gather enough initiative to question and think and figure out how Putin's government is steering their lives, country, into the brink of poverty, destruction, and misery? Theoretically, yes. Practically, I don't believe so. And that's the last thing I'm going to answer here is I just don't see how they can do it. Because their mentality is just like when Nazi was talking about the Kazakh Ukrainian versus the Russian serf, they've just been beaten down for centuries as serfs, and then communism, like don't stick up, Solzhenitsyn talks in the Gulag Archipelago about how they're applauding for some official, and they're clapping, and nobody wanted to be the first to stop clapping because that could go very badly. And the first that stopped, everybody else stopped immediately after the first guy, and then he's taken out and executed. Like, and you have, so the Soviet Union implodes, and then you have Russia becoming more and more authoritarian as the war goes on. You go to jail if you speak against the war or hold up a blank placard, or right. I mean, so it's all kinds of bad stuff like that. But yeah, I don't see it practically happening. Okay, folks, thank you for your time. We're about 40 minutes in. This was a good recap for the week. I think this is what I'm going to try to do is do like a weekly Q&A recap. That's different than doing the news. I felt like bad about not providing the news, but I think the recap will give everything and allow the question and answer. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in another video. Bye bye.